Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I'm going to work on a friend's reel of mine. My friend brought this over to me, said it just needs a tune-up. Got a little noise in it. Not sure we're going to be able to solve that. That might be a bearing issue. But at any rate, this is a Mitchell reel. It's a modern-day Mitchell reel. It's the Mitchell Advanta. I guess taking off on adventure maybe. I don't know. Advantage. 3-ball bearing reel, high speed, 5.5 to 1. It says it's the 1000 size, and it looks a little big for a 1000 size, but it is definitely a freshwater reel, and it shares in common with some of the older Mitchells a very wide and thick spool base, so you're not going to get a lot of line onto this. In fact, what it's saying here is the capacity is 175 yards of 6-pound tests. So they don't expect you to put a lot of line on this one. And I think, from what I can tell here, this is one of these metal bodies that's plastic coated to kind of resist corrosion and the like. But at any rate, we're going to take this apart. We'll show you how the reel is made. If you have one of these, we'll show you how to service it. If you're thinking of buying one of them, you'll get a little bit of a lowdown on what the reel is made of. Seems nice enough. Like I said, there's just a little bit of a noise in there, which could be bearing or lubrication related, and we'll get to know this reel as we work through this. What we do know is that the folks that are working day in and day out tirelessly to help us through this pandemic, that's our first responders, essential personnel, and all healthcare workers, your efforts truly are appreciated. We know you've been working crazy, and this pandemic just doesn't want to quit on us. So thank you for all you do to keep us safe and to restore the health those that have the COVID. Really appreciate all of your efforts. Well, I start by taking off the external parts. In this case, just going to take the handle out first. I noticed when I was winding the handle that the side button was turning. If that side button is turning, it's an indication that you have a bar that goes through the main gear. And if that's the case, you need to remove that screw in order to get the handle out. You can't twist it out. If you try to twist it out, you're going to break it. So one of the things that indicates a certain quality of a reel is the screws. And I'm looking here, and these two screws are rusting. That means that they haven't been used. They didn't use stainless steel screws. They used steel screws instead. Saved a couple of pennies by doing it. That's disappointing. So we've got 3 of these. One that's sitting below here, which holds the bump guard. And I imagine that there's a screw hiding underneath the bump guard. We'll get that out. We'll take a better look there. And while I'm doing that, I'm looking at the case itself. I want to see how the case sits. Does the side plate end here, or does it go up and under the case? And I think it ends at this ridge here. We're going to find out. That will all depend on the way that you take the reel apart. Sometimes you have to go and remove the rotor before you can remove that side case. That has an advantage and a kind of a disadvantage. The disadvantage is to the person servicing it. The advantage to the owner is that the water can't get up or through that side plate into the main cavity easily. Let's take one of those rusted head screws out. So even though this is a freshwater reel, freshwater will rust steel screws just like anything else will. And these certainly have begun that stage. So what I like to do when I see something like that, I can't fix that. But what I can do is try to prevent it, and the way to prevent it is just use a little penetrating oil on it. Kind of give it a coat there, let it sit. Let's see if we can get that case off. I think this one goes up and under. This one's very hard to see. Yeah, we're going to assume that it goes under. So we're going to take the spool off. When I take these pieces of parts off, they go in my parts tray. It's the bottom of a jug. And that just keeps all the pieces and parts in one place and keeps them out of trouble. I probably would be in a lot of trouble if I just left these parts on my desk. A lot of folks use all kinds of different approaches to organizing their parts as they take them off. Some of them like to line them up in the order that they take them off. Some people like myself use the parts tray, and some of them just kind of dump them randomly and kind of rely on their memory for where that goes. Well, a tip if you're relying on your memory, take pictures along the way. Taking pictures will tell you the sequence that you took the pieces and parts out in, and if you do have a memory lapse there, at least you'll have a point to go and take a look back and see what went where. All right, this looks like a 10 millimeter. I'm turning it this way now, the traditional counterclockwise to remove it, and it's tightening. So that means that it gets reversed in order to take this off. So we're turning in a clockwise method to take the rotor assembly off. That nut goes into the parts tray, and there's nothing underneath here. We did have a tie down screw, but there's no washers or anything. You could just pay attention to that. Okay, now with that out, we find out why you couldn't take that case off. This is an additional screw underneath here. So we've got to go ahead and take that out. So right now what I'm seeing is a fairly straightforward design in a fishing reel, and that's all good. Like I said, the only knock on it right now is that the reel has some steel screws which have rusted. Here's a good place to take a picture. What is your stack here on top of that bearing? This has a traditional anti-reverse dog. It's friction led. When you turn your pinion gear, it's going to pull it in, and then when you go to pull back, it's going to pull out. Pulling out is going to intersect that with the rigid teeth in the spool there, and that's how the reel is going to stop backpedaling. I get an awful lot of questions about anti-reverses. I guess they fail quite frequently in reels. Happy to try and answer your problem for you. Just leave those questions on this reel, on anti-reverses, or any issues that you may be having in the comment section of this video. I'll try to get you an answer. All right, this came off. We know that the wing part of that anti-reverse there, that spring, that's going to go up in orientation when you go to reinstall. So I have two screws that are acting as the collar for the bearing, and note there's a little washer here. Just don't lose that when you pull that whole assembly. So I'm going to remove those right now. Then I'm going to go down and finish the case before I take that pinion gear or anything else out. So that screw is a little bit different. You do need to note the different screws, where they come and go from. And it looks like with this one, to get this screw out, you got a tight tolerance there. So you want to back off that override on the anti-reverse in order to get that out. Okay, that's kind of tight there. I think what we're going to do, instead of risking anything, we're going to take that anti-reverse dog off, just to be safe. Now it looks like the screw for the anti-reverse dog is the same screw as the other two, but we're going to note that. Possibly not. It looks a little longer maybe. Yeah, so this screw's a little bit longer than the other two. You always want to pay attention to which ones are long, which ones are short. Some of them have different heads on them, some of them don't. Okay, maybe you've over-tightened that a little bit too much on the way out. Now we should be able to take this off. There we go. I'm just going to take that long screw that belongs in that anti-reverse, just put that over on the side. Then these are our two cap screws for the bearing and pinion gear assembly. And lay them on my table as well. And now we should take the case off. That should just slide out at this point. Get some of the oils on my hand there, and that makes it a little tough. So underneath, this looks like pot metal, which I would expect kind of in this reel. It's pretty straightforward in terms of a design. This is nothing new in terms of engineering. I don't want to say these reels are a dime a dozen, but these reels are kind of made this way. Pot metal is just kind of a whole bunch of alloys, I guess. And I want to just pull off the axle shaft there. pull the pinion gear and the bearing assembly out. That's fine. Take the main gear out. There should be a bearing on the other side, which there is. Take the crosswind block out. Take the oscillation gear out. And that's it. This is our case. It's nice and clean. So at least I'll compliment my buddy on keeping the inside of his reel clean. Wasn't too dry, wasn't too wet. And this, still wondering, this one's a molded plastic of some description. It's not a metal coated or plastic coated piece of metal. That's interesting to note. So this is, I imagine this is on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of the fishing reels that Mitchell is building these days. I've seen some beautiful ones. The 308X and Pro, they have worm drive gears in them, very nice. But this one I think is just capitalizing on the Mitchell name. Nowhere bears any resemblance to the reels of the Mitchell 300 and 308 era, but it is functional. This one is, if it's a 1,000 size reel, if they're telling you to fish 6-pound tests with it, there's really nothing wrong with the approach to this reel. It's not meant for super big fish. The materials seem like they're fine in terms of durability. And the only thing with this one is it hasn't been oiled or greased in quite some time. We see that by the dried bearings. And that's probably that little bit of noise that we were hearing there in terms of turning the reel. All right, we can see that it hasn't been oiled or greased since the original reel. This is the factory grease in here, and it's all spun out. And it's spun out because of centrifugal force. Credit to whoever on my blog made me educated about that. I used to say, well, it just spins from going round and round, and they said that, nope, that's called centrifugal force. Thank you. All right, we're going to just put fishing reel grease onto the gears now. I use Penn Precision reel grease. I guess that's somewhat in the family. Mitchell is now part of the Pure Fishing group, as is Penn and Abu and Finor and Van Stoll and Berkeley and blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of them out there. Okay, before I go any further, I want to take that pinion gear. Again, we're devoid of any kind of greases in here. So we want to butter up the pinion gear. I want to put this pinion gear and bearing back in before I go and reset the main gear. Okay, I'm going to put a lot of grease on that. Now we have the bearing. I'm going to oil that bearing. I oil bearings, I don't grease them. In this case, you could put fishing reel grease in if you know solely was going to be fresh water. But even there, people drop these reels in ponds. They leave them on the banks. They get dirt and dust in them. And to me, when that occurs, it's a problem because the dirts get trapped in those greases where oil tends to be a little bit more neutral to that. Oil tends to evaporate faster, so folks want to use those greases because they stay around longer. You can see, I'm not sure what the age of this reel is, but the factory greases are still in there. That's certainly not true of anything that may have been oiled in this reel. Oils will have evaporated by now. All right, we're going to put the two pieces from each side. There's an example of why that should be in my parts tray, not in my desk, because that little tie down for the axle shaft, that screw just got caught up with the other one. All right, these are going to go in like this. Make sure that your axle shaft is nice and tight. I'm going to flip this back the other way. I'm going to take this anti-reverse lock. Now, if you weren't taking pictures along the way, you might have a tendency to put this upside down. But so that's why you got to note what was what. Well, this was the pin for the screw, a spring rather. So you need to note how that was working. And this one has the long screw in it. So if you didn't know that, it's very easy to put this one on upside down. And then you're going to go reassemble your entire reel, and you're going to have to take it apart again to make that all better. So if you like these kinds of videos, I ask you to subscribe. And if you do subscribe to my channel, please hit notifications. That way you'll see the reels that I'm posting. I post all kinds of reels, not just freshwater reels, but I post everything that I work on, and that's saltwater, freshwater, conventional bait casters, etc. And you can choose which ones you want to work on. I just got a note from one of our channel viewers that said I had just done a reel on a big pen spin fisher, and he wrote me a note and said, "Thanks so much." He said, "I was just getting ready to run that servicing of my video, and servicing, and what I did was I was able to connect with your video that you just published to take a look at how that spin fisher worked and service mine." So there you go. All right, well, we're all greased up here. Please note there is a little washer on this side of the case. And now what we want to do is we want to grab the axle shaft, make sure that's clean, grab our brush, light coat of grease. If you put more than a light coat of grease on this, if you just glob it on, well, it's just going to run off here because that's a tight tolerance on when it goes through. And then we just want to seat it down here so that you have the hole in the crossline block set with the hole in the axle shaft. And we should be able to get this back in, and this is kind of the view you saw just a little while ago when we took it all apart. I got a question once. Somebody asked me, should I put all kinds of grease on the face of the main gear? Doesn't hurt, but it doesn't help anything. There's no rotational parts in there or anything. So I said you don't need to do it, but if you've got extra grease that you want to spread around, go right ahead. I guess maybe they're thinking that the metals in the main gear are going to rust. That's possible. All right, so now we have the 2 rusted screws. Kind of a shame that you kind of realize where those rusted screws go because they're rusted. Well, we did a little bit there in terms of putting some penetrating oil on there to maybe kind of protect it. One of the things you should do when you finish a trip, regardless of where it is, saltwater, freshwater, or long or short, a whole day on the water or 20 minutes on the water, or just a few casts from shore, you should take your reel home and rinse it off. That will get any of the dirt and debris, the sand, micro sands that can come up out of the ocean spray, or any of the dust or dirt maybe that if you were on a pond and had this thing kind of propped up against a little rod holder or something. Get it out of there before it has a chance to do any damage. Penn makes a product, it's called Penn Rod and Reel Cleaner, and if you squirt that down afterwards, you could protect those screw heads from rusting. Also, a lot of people like to spray their reel down with WD-40 after they've rinsed it off, and that's fine too. WD-40 was originally, I guess, invented as a water displacement thing, keep things dry. So it has its place. All right, we're going to just put our rotor back on now. I made sure that I have the override so that I keep this little dog in at this point. A little bit of dirt on here, so let's get that out of the way. While I have the rotor off, there is a trip arm here, so we can put a little bit of grease, oil in there. I like to oil the seams of the rotor and the line roller, even if it doesn't have a bearing in it. I'm sure this one doesn't. This one said 3 ball bearings. We saw them. And those ball bearings are in the right place. There's one on each side of the main gear, and there's one on the pinion gear. And to me, that's about all that matters in ball bearings. We just did one not too long ago on a reel that's just being introduced into the market. It has 10 ball bearings. Well, those of you that watched the video know 6 of them are kind of in useless places. There's 2 of them on the spool. There's 2 of them in the handle. and there was 2 of them in a line roller. I'm not going to say they just wasted the bearings, but those are minimal in terms of how a reel operates. You want to make sure that your reel is got the bearings on the sides first. See, 2 sides of the main gear and one up top on the pinion gear. I was just having a little trouble there. It's funny when they reverse these screws. There you go. That works nice. It plays with your mind in terms of trying to get that set just right. There's a tie-down screw for this. So if you like these kinds of videos, I'd ask you to like this. Somehow that helps my channel ranking. I'm not a YouTube guru in terms of how these channel rankings are resolved, but it does, I'm told it does help my channel, so I would appreciate it if you like the video. And if you're like my buddy, if you have a reel that you need to service, but you're maybe not up for it or don't have the time or whatever, then if you contact me, I'll be happy to give you the repair information where you can send in a reel. All right, we got to put the bump guard back on. It's a help of a parts tray because not all reels come with bump guards, and the amount of reels I worked on would be easily overlooked in terms of putting it back together again. Plus, some of the reels I get in, even if they came with bump guards, they sometimes don't have them after a while. All right, I'm going to take the handle. I'm going to put that back on now. We'll go up top. We'll service the drag washers, and then we're going to see how this thing comes together and how it works. So right now, I don't know what the pricing on this reel was. I'd say if it was in the $20 to $30 range, I'd say that's a fair value. A little bit of an issue getting the handle back in. That's kind of interesting. There we go. I don't know what was hanging that up. All right, put that screw back on. This has the collapsible handle. It also has the interchangeable. So if you want to drive this with your right hand instead of your left hand, just swap it around. It'll fit on either side. All right, this has a little 5-sided clip on it that you're going to remove in order to service the drag washers. My guess is on this one, it's going to be either a Teflon washer or it's going to be a felt washer. And I'm going to guess a 3-stack system, and I'm just going to guess the felt, and we have a felt washer. These are in good condition, so that's not surprising for a 1,000 size. If this is a 1,000 or 2,000 size reel, they don't use a lot of drag washer. So you do want to make sure that they're flexible. That was the test I was doing there in terms of wiggling it back or forth. If you find that it's hard or it's breaking or snapping, well, then you need to replace that. The way to keep from replacing them is to put oil onto felt washers. This has a 3-drag system, so there's 3 felt washers, there's 3 metal washers. 2 of the metal washers are round with a rectangular center. Those are called keyed washers. They go high and low in the reel, so that's the first one in. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to put some oil onto that one. The middle one is called an eared washer. That one goes in the middle, just like that. Make sure you get it into grooves. Last one up then is another felt washer. These are clean, so it's apparent that they just haven't hit any big fish to tear these up. If you do find that you're tearing them up, a lot of times these are standard drag washers, and you can find a replacement, either a hard one like a Teflon or a Carbon Tex washer. And a lot of those are interchangeable. Just find the size, measure the size of your washers, and then go to someplace like smoothdrag.com, and they can help you with that size. All right, that goes on next. Start the adjuster button goes on. Let's see if we took that little tick, tick, tick out. We did. There we go. All right, so that is your Mitchell Advanta. It says it's an MA1000 size. It only holds 175 yards, a 6-pound test. It's clearly a freshwater reel. And overall, like I said, it's not going to win any design awards, but it's got a standard design that's been there forever. And this one's been cleaned, it's been lubricated, it's ready to go fishing again. So I hope you've enjoyed that. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Please stay safe, stay well, stay watching, and have a great day.